The history of Iranian People's Revolution from the defeat of 1979 to restart in 2009, presented at the hangout place of Iran Solidarity Vancouver. Some of the major events happened before 1979 revolution were as follows. 1941, we had the Second World War, which Iran was occupied by Allied forces, and we had the Shah regime enforcing a very tight dictatorship and limit the freedom of political parties. 1953, it was a CIA-led coup d'etat shortly after the nationalization of the oil industry. And 1961 was declaration of the land reform by Shah under the banner of White Revolution, which changed the system in Iran from feudalism to capitalist system. And 1971 was the rise of left-leaning guerrilla groups influenced by Cuban and Algerian revolution and also the Palestinian movements. And 1973 was the sharp increase in oil price from $5 to $6 a barrel to 22 to 24, which gave a big boom to the industry, and we had completely almost 100% employment during that 1973 for 2 years. And also it provide lots of space around the Tehran for peasants that are coming to the city to work in the manufacture. And I remember that there were signs across the carriage corridor permanently saying workers are needed, and that was very rare. And even the government forced to bring workers from Bangladesh, from India, and from Philippines. On the right hand side you can see pictures of the people during that 1953 and 1941 demonstrating in Tehran, and also the coup d'etat and the Allied forces. And the other two signs are the Mujahideen sign and logo, and also the Fadayan logo, which the guerrilla movement started in 1971. As I mentioned, after the sharp increase of the oil, many peasants from different villages, they came to Tehran and big cities and start building shanty house around the perimeter of the cities and working in the manufacture, which was needed many workers. And I remember there was signs everywhere that we need workers. And after the boom is finished, about a year and a half and 2 years, in 1976, the government basically, after the decrease of the oil price, they didn't need these extra workers, so they forced them to leave the city. And that's why the municipalities, they attacked these shanty houses and they try to destroy these shanty towns and force them back home. However, people courageously fighting back, and in 14 different shanty towns around Tehran, people fight back. And this report on the right hand side you see is referring to 14 shanty town struggle against the municipality. This report was released in 1977. And we also have on the right hand side two pictures showing peoples in those shanty houses, shanty towns. What are the situation? As you can see, there is no water. Most of it is running water in the city, and it was a miserable situation. However, it was better than nothing and going back to the villages which already destroyed. Knowing that there will be a crisis coming with the decline of the oil, Shah, like any other dictatorship, they only think about how you can unite the ruling class and then attack this movement that is going to rise and prepare for that. So Shah basically abolished the two existing pro-government parties and declared only one party, which was named Rastakhiz, and meaning rise, and announced that any dissident that does not agree can leave the country. This was part of the unifying the ruling class to combat the potential movement that they were predicting coming. On the right hand side you can see the picture of the Congress of the Rastakhis party, and at the picture below you see Shah in Mecca, which performing the ceremony of Hajj. And this is also well-known fact that during the Shah, official religion of Iran was Shia, and anybody was not Shia was treated as like a second-hand citizen. This was ruling during the Shah as well as during the Islamic regime. And also because of the anti-communist policy of the Shah, he allowed all the clergy, all the mosques to have activity while he was against secular liberals and communist movement in Iran. He was very harsh against them, but he was also trying to create and help the green belt against the Soviet Union, which was the north neighbor of Iran. On the left hand side you see a caricature showing how Shah is robbing the other ruling class, and then it's like a hierarchy. Everybody is robbing from the top to bottom the wealth of the people. And on the bottom you see the picture, the Shah while having millions of dollars in his pocket, crying wolf for the poor while they were living in misery. As the tip of iceberg of the revolutionary movement in Iran started in those shanty towns by their riots, the reformists who were not part of the government and were scared of the people's uprising in the future started writing open letters to the Shah and asked him to remain a monarch, not a dictator. Bazargan, the first prime minister selected by Khomeinie after the revolution, was one of these reformists. These politicians were referred to as liberals, and in the period shortly before and after the revolution, the term liberal turned into an insult, because as the revolution is going forward, like any other revolution, to overthrow the regime, anybody stopping or trying to have a reform type of solution somehow keep the regime or part of it considered by the revolution as traitors, and this is what happened. On the right hand side picture you see Bazargan on the top, and also Fruhar, which was the Ministry of Labor during the Khomeinie. He was also terrorized and killed by some of the Islamic forces of regime. The bottom picture is Bakhtiyar, the last prime minister of the Shah, and he was also killed by Islamic regime in France. Student movements in universities. University students, especially among the engineering universities, were one of the main sources of opposition to the Shah's regime. Many student activists became the leaders and organizers of the main left and Marxist groups in Iran. Two major guerrilla groups at that time was Mujahideen Khalq and Fadayan Khalq, where most of their leaders were from student activists. There were three major trends among the left students in Iran. All of them perhaps were illegal during the Shah. Line 1 was Tudeh Party, affiliated with the Soviet Union. Line 2 was Fadayan Khalq, a guerrilla group. And Line 3 was small groups working in factories, some of which were Maoist. Line 2 was the most popular before the revolution, which was Fadayan Khalq. Another event was the Poetry Nights at the University of Technology in Tehran, which was 1977. The Poetry Nights at this university were the first open declaration of the left in universities. There were lots of demonstrations at every year, which was the student day, but never the left has a declaration like that Poetry Night. 1977. After one night of the poetry and protest, students marched outside to the street and were attacked by the police before the Revolutionary Square. And that was the first massive gathering of the leftist students in protest to dictatorship. And you can see before that was the riots of the shanty town. So on the right hand side you see the pictures of the technology university in Tehran, and on the right hand side some of the women that protesting with their fist.